This past Friday, June 2nd, Foo Fighters released their 11th studio record, But Here We Are, their first record without the late Taylor Hawkins since 1997's The Color and the Shape. In the absence of Hawkins, Dave Grohl reprised his role as drummer for the album, something that he hasn't done since the band's 2002 record, One by One. According to a statement made by the band on December 31st of 2022, they're going to be a different band going forward without Taylor. And as such, this new record marks the rebirth of Foo Fighters and a new era for their music. With that said, how does this new record stand up to other rock albums coming out in 2023? Is But Here We Are the best rock album of the year with more than 6 months and a lot of albums still left to go? Well, my name's Justin, and in today's video, we're gonna find out. So without further ado, let's get right into it. It should come as no surprise to hear that this album is heavily centered around grief and loss. What may come as a surprise though is that this record isn't exclusively about Taylor Hawkins, as Dave's mother also passed away during 2022. This guy needs to catch a break, honestly. With that said, I think it's a miracle this album even exists, considering the songs had to be written in the end of 2022 to early 2023 at the absolute latest. If I lost a close friend and family member within months of each other, I don't think I'd be able to write songs about it for years. That alone makes this record a big deal, and the songwriting maturity shown by Dave and the band is truly something to behold. Now, despite But Here We Are being lyrically inspired by the passing of loved ones, it's not a depressing record by any means. I've listened to it front to back maybe 4 or 5 times now, and I never felt sad or defeated by the end. It's something different, and the word I've settled on is sober. It's the kind of record that hits on some very real, very heavy topics and forces you to seriously think about them and how your life relates to them. If we're defining quality strictly by how an album connects with its listeners, then we're already done. But Here We Are is undoubtedly an incredible record that'll be hard to top. But of course, that's not the only thing that determines a record's quality. So let's dive into the other aspects of this album. I don't normally talk about album artwork since I'm not a graphic designer or visual artist in that sense, but I think this album's art deserves some recognition. I was actually a little confused by it at first. Since the graphic is almost entirely white, I thought it just hadn't loaded properly on my computer screen. When it's shrunk down to a thumbnail on a phone or on Google, it just looks like an empty canvas. But when you look closer, then you start to see the subtle details and shades of color in the center. To me, this is a beautiful reflection of the album's themes. Not just the idea of feeling empty and blank, but also feeling still and at peace. The closing track, Rest, speaks to those who've passed, saying that their journey and struggles are at an end and they can finally be at peace. The white illustration in the art is almost like the white light often depicted enveloping people as they leave this life. I think the minimalistic approach to the album art was the perfect choice, and it aids in telling the story of the record before it begins and after it ends. That's not something you often see, so I had to give it some credit. Onto the music, I'll admit that I'm not a diehard fan of Foo Fighters by any means, but I haven't heard a single song of theirs that I didn't at least moderately enjoy, and this record is no different. All 10 tracks have something unique and engaging to offer, and in the case of the 10-minute penultimate track, The Teacher, several somethings unique and engaging. The album starts with the bombastic single Rescued, which has the same punk energy as some of the band's biggest hits like Everlong and Monkey Wrench, followed by another up-tempo single called Under You. This song actually threw me off at first because Dave's vocals occasionally sounded identical to Joey Cape from the punk rock band Lagwagon. Regardless, despite being known for his tendency to scream his vocals, Dave also has a great clean tone filled with emotion, and that's on display in this song. Speaking of screaming, the album's title track is probably one of my favorite tracks from this album. One thing I particularly love is that the use of 7/8 throughout much of the song never feels cliche or like it's being shoved down your throat. In fact, the first time I heard the track, it didn't even register that parts of it were in 7/8. It feels quite natural and smooth despite having an odd time signature that's normally associated with the opposite feelings. I attribute this to the long vocal phrases suspended over top. Dave's simple vocal melody contrasts the rhythmic complexity happening in the instruments, giving the whole section balance. And while this isn't the only surefire way to make 7/8 feel natural in mainstream rock, it's executed flawlessly in But Here We We Are, and demonstrates the band's talent as songwriters. Coming into track 5, we reach not my favorite song, but my favorite part of a song. I don't know exactly what it is, but I just absolutely love the verses from The Glass. Something about the melodic motion on the phrase, waiting for this storm to pass, waiting on this side of the glass, just hits all the right notes for me. Plus, the language of this song, like in Left to Live Without Him, is beautiful, implying that the person has moved on to something else, and you are the one left alone contemplating life and missing them. It's heartbreaking and gushing with pain and confusion and frustration and grief. People often say that the best art comes from the worst of times, and as sad as that is, this record only further proves that concept. Processing such a complex and consuming emotion as loss is not easy, so the fact that Foo Fighters have translated that so clearly into this record is really something to behold. Following the halfway point, the album finds a new gear with the viciously aggressive Nothing at All, and the nebulous Show Me How, which features Dave's daughter Violet as a guest vocalist. Admittedly, this song isn't my cup of tea, but like I said earlier, there isn't a song on this record I actively dislike, just a couple where I'm indifferent, for lack of a better word. The next song, Beyond Me, also falls into this category, unfortunately causing a low point in the album for me. However, things do pick up with the aforementioned 10-minute saga, The Teacher. This track is weird. As a fan of Alter Bridge and Rush, I'm obviously accustomed to long songs with potentially multiple distinct sections. The Teacher is something entirely different though. It's basically 2 or maybe 2.5 songs taped together into one. But what makes this track very strange is that it seems like the first song ends at 4 minutes and 30 seconds after this massive climax, but then it suddenly starts up again, returns to the verse, and continues the song like normal. Almost like they got distracted mid-song and went off on a tangent before getting back on track. Then they hardbreak again after that last chorus and completely switch gears to the second song. From here on out, none of the ideas presented in the first half are ever revisited, so it makes me wonder what the logic was behind combining these two very distinct and different songs. The shift between the two is drastic enough that they theoretically could have broken them into 2 tracks with a seamless fade between the two, and it likely would have accomplished the same goal. Ultimately, the decision to combine them doesn't detract from the song in any way, but I'm just curious because I'd love to know their thought process. With that, we finally come to the end of the album with Rest. Honestly, I feel like there's not much else to say about this song besides what I mentioned while discussing the album artwork. This track is a true sonic embodiment of the imagery, and I just can't think of a better way to conclude the record. That fuzz effect used on the track sits right on the border of being obnoxious, but enough of the actual music can still be heard so that it feels more like a texture than just white noise, which is pretty cool considering white noise is likely the effect they were going for. Altogether, just a great choice for the album to leave listeners contemplating life and death while also feeling some sense of finality and closure. But Here We Are is an unrestricted view into the grieving process for this band, and it hits every beat both lyrically and musically to deliver a satisfying experience for any fans of rock music. Like I said before, I'm not a super fan of Foo Fighters by any means, but this record makes me feel like I know them and have listened to them for years. And that is truly impressive. Personally, I don't consider this album to be perfect, as there are songs that interested me less than others, but I can get behind every choice made and respect the craft that went into writing this album. I can see myself returning to specific tracks from this record for casual listening, like Rescued, Nothing at All, The Glass, Under You, and the title track, whereas other songs will only appear if I'm in the mood for a top to bottom listen. I will say the more radio-friendly tracks do seem to be front-loaded, hence why most of my favorites are from the first half of the album, so I can see others following suit and giving more attention to the first 5 or 6 tracks than the latter half. However, I'd maintain that everyone should listen to this record front to back at least once. Each song has something important to say and offer, and getting the full experience of this record is critical for understanding the emotions felt by Dave and the band as they process the loss of their loved ones. It's a record that will make you think, and you may even need to take a break from music for a few minutes once it's over so you can digest everything you just heard. But Here We Are is a great album, definitely one of the best of this year, and I cannot wait to see what this band does next. So that's my thoughts, but now I want to hear yours. What's your favorite song from the record? What do you think of the new direction the band is headed in? Share your take with everyone down in the comments. And if you're curious about other hard rock records released in the last couple of years, check out this playlist of reviews right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.